And that brings us to our discussion agenda. Item number 16, Social Studies Education, shown in Exhibit D. And Dr. Milton.
To you, a revised policy for social studies education. The revisions that you're going to find suggested on page 4 of this particular exhibit are to make sure that we are in alignment with state board regulations for our defined minimum program of social studies, but also to be in alignment with the South Carolina Founding Principles Act, which was passed last year here in South Carolina. So the details that you see in the third paragraph are simply just to align what our previous policy had with what has now been passed last legislative season. And then beneath that, where you see Veterans Day, we have caught a typographical error from the previous policies that we're trying to correct. So we've been able to make sure that the recommendation you see without the apostrophe with Veterans Day is the appropriate way according to the Office of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs. So we tried to make that correction with both the heading and also within the passage. Now, if you have any questions about the actual content being instructed with social studies, if you were to talk with our social studies teachers and coordinator, really the content and the standards have not changed at this point, because when this was passed, there has not been a cyclical review of standards. That is on the horizon for us. Our social studies teachers feel like this information that include the Federalist Papers and the Bill of Rights, we're already teaching that within our curriculum and instruction, but it's just to make sure that this is protected so that as there are standard revisions in the state of South Carolina, that these do not change, that they are maintained with integrity to be sure that they're taught across the state. So those details will hopefully explain a little more information to you about the revisions that were found in the third paragraph of this revision. Mr. Gann, I'll be happy to take any questions should there be any.
Any questions, anyone? Ms. Hammond?
Mine's just a comment. But as a social studies teacher, I was so glad to hear you say we already do all those anyway.
Absolutely.
We really didn't need it in writing, but I think you're right about protecting it. And I was going to ask, I see Veterans Day and then, you know, the Constitution Day. Is it not, do we not have South Carolina Day for March 17th?
We have it for third grade.
All right. But it just didn't, you just pulled out this that had to do with that.
We did. This
Okay.
is actually using the model policy from the School Boards Association, but our coordinator for social studies is very intentional to make sure she gets those reminders out that things are done.
I'm so glad. But anyway, thank you. I know that reading and math get everything, but I think that social studies has to do with the whole country, so I'm so glad that we're protecting it. Thank you.
Any other questions? And I know you would entertain any that came in during the couple of weeks that we don't, before we meet again. So if anybody comes up with anything, please forward them on and they'll consider it, I'm sure. Thank you. And that brings us to item number 17, which is budget parameters for 2017, 2018. Mr. Richardson.
Kind of fancy. Feel like I ought to have a keyboard up here. Thank you, Mr. Gant, members of the board. Last but not least, and what we're all been here all night waiting on, we'll give you some parameters of what we're looking for on our general fund budget for the upcoming school year. You see this on every one of my presentations I do to the board as far as our budgets. I always have a disclaimer up there because all of this information that I'm providing to you tonight is subject to change as the House appropriation, as the appropriations bill goes through the House and then the Senate and ultimately to the governor. But right now, some information up here that I want to point out to you. I won't go through all of this information. This is what some of the information you see up here is what the current year's budget is based upon, and then I want to point out some of the things that are we're looking at for next year. You can't see this on your screen, but I do want to point out a couple things here. On the 2016-17 appropriated statewide weighted pupil units, the EFA allocation or appropriation were based on weighted pupil units of 986,595. At the 45th day of this year, we've already exceeded that. We're at 993,605. And the last line there shows you what the appropriated weighted pupil units for 2017, 2018 will be, which is just an increase of approximately 375 weighted pupils. And as you can see, we grew about 7,000 above what was projected for the current year, so I believe this number is going to be a little low. Also, the fully funded base student cost as provided by the Department of Administration is $2,984. The Department of Education requested base student cost of $2,500, and right now in the Ways and Means version of this budget, we're at $2,400, which is an increase of $50 per pupil. I wanted you to see this state budget calendar because it's a little different than what we've seen in the past. Part of the actions that the General Assembly took last year was to shorten their legislative sessions. So as it stands right now, we're already obviously into the House floor debate, which will start tomorrow on the budget. And then, of course, it works its way through the Senate. But as you can see, as you can see here, the last day of the session is May 11th, which is considerably shorter. Now, that doesn't mean they'll live up to that date, but that is considerably shorter than what we've experienced in the past. We typically run into June. This is just a recap of what was passed in the current year's budget. Just to give you a few reminders, we increased our budget by a little over $8 million last year, or for the current year. We provided a 2% cost of living for all employees. We also gave all eligible employees a step increase, and we also provided a $500 loyalty bonus for all of our district employees. This is just a recap of the total projected revenue and expenditures for the current year. And I would like to point out that in our projected revenue, we did include operational balance of $670,385. And we did this without a millage increase. All right, here's what we're looking at for next year, and these are some pretty big items that are facing us. We're looking at a 2% increase in our employer retirement contribution rate. That total, I estimate, just based on the current year budget, is going to be somewhere between $2 and $2.5 million for next year. It's going to cost us. We're looking at a 3.3% increase in our health insurance premiums for the employer. That's estimated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1.3 million that's going to cost us. We're going to provide step increases for all our eligible employees. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1.5 million. I'm expecting a minimal growth in our mill value. If you recall, our debt service millage had to go up this year because assessments weren't coming in as projected. So, just to do what we're doing right now, without adding anything, it's going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of in excess of $5 million is what I'm estimating. There are some issues going on at the state that I guess puts us at odds with pension reform, road repair in the state, Hurricane Matthew recovery cost, and then education funding. Obviously, are all fighting over an additional $446 million for next year. This past year, we had over $1.2 billion to deal with, and that's why it was such a good budget year for us. But looking back now, I think probably one of the best things that this board did was to give our employees the $500 loyalty bonus rather than a permanent pay increase, because that is one expense that we do not have to do next year. Had we built it in as a permanent pay increase, we would have continued to have that on an annual basis. I'm going to interject a little humor here. I'm going to show you just a very short video, but it kind of just lets you know where our state is headed with these 4 different issues here. That was education that spun out, by the way. There are some state funding changes that I need to make you aware of, some good, some not so good. There's been a $38 million increase to the EFA to raise the base student cost, like I mentioned earlier, by $50 per pupil. Like I said, we have the 2% employer contribution rate for retirement going up in July. And it will continue to go up for the next, I think it may go through 2022 rather than 2023. But it will go up 2% for next year and then 1% each year after that. The employee rate currently is 8.66%. The changes to the retirement system and part of this bill to lower the liability on the retirement system is to increase the employee's share of what they pay in, but cap it at 9%. So it's all, a little less than a 0.5% increase for employees next year as well. There's $24 million to cover the health insurance premium increases. I need to let you know that $25.4 million is not specific to education. That is for the entire state. So we have to share that with all the state agencies. There's $100 million in EIA funds, Education Improvement Act funds, to upgrade facilities in the lawsuit districts. The not so good is the elimination of $23.8 million in lottery funding, which are used for the K-12 technology initiative. That's on average been a little better than $500,000 to this district for technology that we will lose next year. There's also the redirection, and you've seen this in previous years, redirection of $23 million in EIA funding for aid to districts, but it is coming back to education, but it's going to come through as money for special ed as part of the settlement with the U.S. Department of Education involving the states not meeting the state maintenance of effort requirement in 2010, I believe, if I recall. And as part of this Ways and Means budget, just thought you might want to know this too, the National Board Incentive Program will no longer offer a supplement for teachers achieving certification. Of course, all of this is subject to change. This is the Ways and Means version of the budget right now. I don't have a lot of information to provide to you yet. The only thing we do know is our consumer price increases. This affects our millage, our ability to raise millage. Our consumer price increase percentage of 1.28% has been updated today, as a matter of fact, and it's been updated to be 1.26% now. Last year, we had a population growth of about 1.4%. We expect this information to be released, I believe it's right around March 23rd, so we'll know a little bit more next week, hopefully, to give us what our allowable millage increase will be. We're currently at 251.5 mills. If we only got the CPI increase, that would give us probably about a little better than 3 mills we could add as it stands currently. Next steps. This is our budget calendar. Obviously, we've already to the March 13th meeting where I'm discussing this with you now. We'll have a budget workshop on March 20th, which is next Monday, and on the 27th, we'll be ready for our discussion reading of the general fund budget. We hope to have this all finished, and we should have better information as we get into this process, but we hope to have it all finished by the May 22nd board meeting. I will be glad to try to answer any questions that you may have.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if you said yes. What's the understanding with the lottery money? It's going to go somewhere else. And how can they, in other words, the lottery itself, the lottery money's there, but they're going to determine it's going to go, it can't go to.
My understanding of what's happening there is the fact that the grading scale has changed to a 10-point scale, has made more kids eligible for scholarships. So that money's being diverted to scholarships.
Okay, that's what I thought. So it's not something we could lobby for, for K through 12. I mean, that's a decision that's made?
I think we always can lobby. I mean,
Well, I mean, that's what I was just trying to get the reasoning, because all of a sudden, to me, that's a lot to be cut out. But I see what you're saying, they need it in another place because there are more scholarships.
That's
And they've
what-
got to pay, and that's what it originally, I guess, went for.
Well, that's my understanding. Originally, that money on it was K-12. If you remember, when lottery was implemented back, I forget what year it was now, but we were getting money for the K-5 enhancement for science, math, those kind of things. And we got that money for a number of years up until probably 2 years, maybe 3 years ago, when we started getting it for technology instead.
And then my other one, it was, I know you said this is just on the table now, but I know teachers get concerned about it. If they would do something with national board certification, all those that already have it would not, they would be, grandfathered.
That's my understanding.
They
This
would
is
just cut
only
out.
for new
I just want to make sure.
teachers, right?
Okay.
Ms. Hutchison.
I just have one question. You said that, okay. You said that we're looking at 3 mil, possibly, 3 mils.
Well, that was just based on the CPI without knowing what the population growth factor would be.
Okay, so it could possibly increase then. It
Well,
just depends.
if we're in the neighborhood of where we were last year, about 1.4% or better, we're probably looking at the ability to raise millage somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 mils, maybe 6.5.
So, just to give a range, 3 mils would be how much money? Approximately.
$750,000, approximately.
Okay, thanks.
So to piggyback on Ms. Hutchison's question, the maximum, if it was 6 mils, would be
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million, which is $500,000 short of the 2% requirement on the pension change.
Yes, sir.
If y'all excuse me, but that, that's gonna be an annual, that's not a one-time, that's every year. But the second year out, it's gonna be 1%,
Correct.
On top of it.
1% in addition to the 2. Oh,
Yes. And an additional 1% added each year to 2022.
okay, I didn't quite understand that. So that picture gets worse every year.
Yes.
Until 21? Until what year?
2022, I believe. I said 2023 on mine.
It's up 1% every year, which is $1.25 million more every year.
So you can call that inflation, you can call it anything you want, but it'll come out of whatever budget we have, and we'll have a choice about that.
It's a cost that this district will have to bear without doing any additional anything.
And also on the national teacher certification, and I believe you answered this, that the teachers that were in that possibly wouldn't be affected. What year did you say that you think that'll take effect?
If the current version is passed, obviously it would be next year, beginning July, so any teacher achieving certification would not get the stipend.
Right. And the state reduced their stipend some years ago, but what is the state stipend right now?
It's 5,000.
5,000.
It was 7,500, and it was changed several years ago.
Okay. So that has potential to go totally away for teachers. Any other
Yes,
questions?
so, question. Seemed like there was some conversation that there would be some kind of relief from the state on this 2% increase. Has there been any, can you shed any more light on that or where that might be going?
Sure. And great question, by the way, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's been mentioned in several articles that you read, and you see the dollars that they're putting towards helping with that situation, understanding that that is for the entire state, not just education. Currently, and there was the School Board Association did a study recently, and I wish I had brought a copy of it. We participated, but they actually looked at our total fringe benefits cost and how much we're receiving from the state to cover those costs. Well, it doesn't begin to cover much. I did a quick calculation before I came in here, so don't hold me to this number, but based on what is being said, based on the Ways and Means version of the budget, they're talking about funding 1% of that 2% required increase on the employer contributions. But in reality, it's a formula-based, it's the same formula that EFA is based upon, so it's a shared cost. But when I did a quick and dirty, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of less than 20% that it's funding. So they're not even beginning to cover our costs.
So just to clarify, so while that might indeed, what we're reading may happen, there's some relief. The net benefit to us as a district is negligible.
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to ask him, back to your disclaimer, make sure I heard you right. The appropriated statewide weighted pupil units was 986,595, and the projected weighted pupil unit was 993,981. Now, the difference, that's students, that's the population, is that correct? Is that what you said?
That's the weighted pupils, correct?
The weighted, yeah.
Right.
The difference in the figure.
Well, it's probably not going to happen, but based on where we are now and based on what was appropriated for the current year, you know, like I said, we've already exceeded that by 7,000. I was hoping that they would do an update to the projection for next year, which means they'd have to put more money on the line in order to fund the base student cost increase.
Okay.
What happens is if we exceed that number, typically, they have to cap the base student cost. So what you're doing is you're spreading the same amount of money over a larger amount of students.
Right.
Mr. White?
Make sure I'm on here. I heard you say that it's going to take $5 million just to fund what we're doing today.
Yes, sir.
All your cost increases, and then we have $50 more budgeted for the base student costs.
Correct.
I just did a rough calculation. That's what, about a little between $800,000 and
About
$1 million.
$800,000.
And then we got $1.5 million of potential millage. So we got about 2.3 revenue and a $5 million increase in cost. Is that kind of our starting point?
Well, yes. I mean, the simple way of looking at it, yes. And there's some other factors in there. I don't know, you know, I don't know now what kind of increase in the value of a mill we can expect, if any. I don't expect a lot based on what I said there. You know, there's some other small line items of revenue that I haven't taken into account with that, but those are the big ones. Now, you know, I'm comparing an estimate for next year compared to an estimate for this year, which is not an actual amount. So our increase may not be as, I don't know how to say that. The increase may be larger than what I'd estimated as bringing in this year, not what we're actually bringing in this year. In other words, if our student population's grown and we get more EFA dollars in, then the actual dollar amount we grow may not be quite as big as what, based on my estimate for last year. If that makes any sense.
But it's still a very unattractive.
I kind of liken this to, it's probably, now I'll have better numbers, obviously, in a couple of weeks. But it's almost, to me, it's like probably one of our worst budget years we've seen since about 2009. And you know what happened back then, right? That was when the bottom fell out. So it's not a pretty picture right now. We do have some things that we're still, you know, currently working on. There's some ways we're trying to control our cost and hopefully be able to cut some costs without impacting what we're doing in the classroom. The fact that we spent better than $1.3 million on bonuses the current year that we're not going to have to spend next year, those kind of things are going to help us to some degree. It may not make up the entire deficit that I think we're facing, but it's going to help us.
So is the School Board Association or anybody lobbying the legislature?
Oh, absolutely they are. That, well, part of all this, I think, and I think I copied all of you, we sent some emails out week before last, I guess it was, because there was some EIA money they were redirecting away from education to go to roads, about $38 million. So we started on that, but yes, they're all lobbying right now. And we continue to send messages.
And I mean, last year our problem was we were basically being singled out with 12 or 13 other districts where money was being shifted, or that had been a pattern for a number of years. We were viewed as having extra money, and it was being shifted to the other districts. We were in a small group that was being treated indirectly in a way that was impacting us that probably the legislature didn't intend, but this applies to everybody, doesn't it?
Absolutely it does.
So we're no longer single, I mean, we're the same as anybody when we say, hey, this is not enough money.
And if you read articles from around the state, which I try to as much as possible, they're all singing the same song as far as this goes.
Okay, Mr. Richardson, give us the good news. We're
That
ready
is
for
the
that.
end of
You
my
got us-
presentation.
You got it. We're set up. I'm ready. Good news.
I always like to start out bad, so hopefully it gets better. I mean, I want to give you what I think is the worst-case scenario, obviously. Hopefully it's not as bad, but I do not expect it to be great either, so.
So you don't have that green towel on it to mean money, right?
Well, St. Patrick's Day,
Mr. Gant, you know what he's doing? This is a teacher trick. He has to start off really strict and really hard. There's no wiggle room,
Yeah.
and then he's gonna find something.
I think he's there. I think he's right on top of it.
You can always let up, but you can't get that strict.
Well, any other question? I know that we do have a budget workshop planned for next Monday, so I'd encourage anybody on the board, if you think of an area or a question that might require some research or some background, let's get that question to Mr. Richardson as soon as we can to make that give him a chance to work with it. And then things will evolve a little bit in the next week too, so it's gonna be an ever-evolving picture. But do plan to get him anything that you got. I think our plan is to meet at 6 p.m. on next Monday, the 20th, in the district office,
It's at the district office.
6 p.m. Any other budget parameter questions? All right, we're gonna wait till next week for the good news, the really good news to start.
Well-
That's, the realistic look is not we're starting at a much different place than we started last year. And I think that's making it a tough budget year all around. and a lot
well,
more
these,
needs.
these, last year was one of the best budget years I've seen in a long time, and I just wish we could have sustained it for at least another year or two.
Right.
But, you know, I guess things happen in election years and not so much in non-election years.
Well, the good news is there's a lot of great things going on in School District 5. Students are thriving, and we're going to do everything we can to keep that going in a positive
Absolutely.
lane. Any other questions, Mr. Richardson?
Well, is the South Carolina School Board Association lobbying to get that lottery money back too?
I don't know the answer to that.
Can y'all ask them that? I mean, that just seems silly that they're taking money away that, I mean, it's because everybody changed the test scores, so they now diluted the scores?
It's because of the 10-point grading scale, more kids qualify for the life scholarship.
But doesn't that mean that statewide we've lowered the scale?
Talk to Marcus Lattimore.
I mean, it has to be. I mean, mathematically, there's no way you can create more students unless you're performing better or, you know, one way to increase the quality of education is just lower the scale, right?
Exactly.
You didn't know that?
Mr. Gant,
Yes, ma'am.
you know, we're making light of it, but I promise you, and I brought it up when we voted on this, because we have to stay competitive. That's why I voted to change it for our district. But you can ask any teacher every day in the classroom. When a kid realizes they're passing with a 60, a lot of them don't worry about it. I'm not talking about these kids that aspire for but it is, I mean, Mr. White's right. In reality, in implementation, it has lowered the standard.
We knew that. It's just state.
Dr. Milton, you have an opinion on that yet? Or are we going to wait and take a look at it? I bet you do.
I have an opinion, yes, sir, but, how can I answer? As Dr. Hepburn said, he said you could commend, Marcus Lattimore, Dabo Sweeney, to try to level the playing fields athletically for our student athletes to have an opportunity to earn a scholarship, whether it's to stay in state or to leave the state. But whenever you're trying to look at a 3.0, you're looking to cast the net wider when you're looking to change the grading scale to a 10-point scale. It is statewide. Last year in the discussion, I believe we were at Chapin Intermediate, maybe when we first brought it to you last year, I reported to you then if it were cost neutral, the number of students that were projected according to the Commission of Higher Education that would not be able to get a scholarship that's been state funded historically. So either they had to make a decision of cut it off where we currently fund it, or let's revise and revamp to align with the grading point scale change. So obviously they've decided to make that alignment, to stay true with what South Carolina has done so that students will hopefully stay in state to go to our state universities. But at the same time, there's been a negative impact on our funding that we anticipated, but we don't really have an opportunity within our profession to make that decision. That's something that happens between consultation of the State Department of Education, the State Board of Education, and the Commission of Higher Education. They're the ones that took the lead on it.
Right.
I will keep my personal opinions to myself, Mr. Gant, because I enjoyed getting a paycheck from School District 5.
So how does Marcus Lattimore fit into this?
He was just one of the people who pushed for the 10-point grading scale. And the argument was that we were one of the most strict states in the country, and to be fair to our students, all students, but specifically, I guess, athletes, they wanted to go to the 10-point system because it would open up more scholarship opportunities for more students.
Is that why he's selling cars for love, Mitsubishi?
But you know,
He wasn't the only one, so my apologies for singling him out. But of course, he is highly respected, and he was one of the chief spokespersons for that change. He wasn't the only one.
And it did get a lot of buy-in from a lot of higher levels, so I mean, we had to realize that. It's had an impact. We've seen it already. So.
well, I mean, you would assume if we were changing the scale, we weren't really, I mean, we weren't going to make it any. I would have thought of A's and A, B's and B, wherever you drew a number, you still try to differentiate based on.
And I think to some extent that's true. I think it's, my opinion is, as an old English teacher, you know, if an essay is worthy of an A, it's going to get an A. And if it's a B, it's going to get a B, whether you're a 10-point scale or a 7-point scale or a 5-point scale. But it may have in a content area like math, it might cast a broader net. But I think it's true in some areas. I mean, to me, I think were I grading an essay, because they changed it from a 93 to a 100 or a 90 to 100, the grade I'm going to give is the same grade I would have given no matter what.
Well, like you're saying, when it's points off, like if it were a math or so, it's a question that's got a right or a wrong answer, not an essay.
Right.
It does lower, because if they miss so many and they're still making the B
Right.
at an 80,
So you
which
see,
used to be a C.
as a teacher, you see,
I mean, I do. I'm talking implementation every day. If you were the parent in there, you would not like how it lowers expectations by the kid. But, you know, I'm with Dr. Melton over there. You know, we aren't making that decision. And I had this conversation directly with Molly Spearman. She is a teacher in her past, knows what we're saying, but she also wants to see our state be competitive. So,
Mr. Chair, I believe we're having a discussion about a policy that has
we can't.
been passed and implemented. I mean, I think there may be merits to either side, and that could be debated at another time, but we're having a discussion with no motion, and then not germane to the item on the floor currently.
Well, I think, and I'm fine with that, but Mr. White brought up, are we or as a school board association, anybody lobbying to get that money put back in a budget. So we are talking about budget parameters. But we're beating it to death. We beat a dead horse here pretty well. But I do think any dollars that were there that are no longer there, that effort's probably going on, but we can certainly follow up on that. Any other questions along the budget parameters? If not, I would entertain a motion that we adjourn and remind you that our next meeting, official meeting of the board will be March 27th, 2017 at Irmo High School. Ms. Baumgartner.
I move that we adjourn.
Have a second? Ms. Hammond seconds. All those in favor? Thank you very much.